Pakistan fears its nukes may be targeted next. And remember, Pakistan has been notorious virtually across the world as a nuclear Walmart, a nuclear black market. Remember the father of the Pakistani bomb, Dr. Abdul Qadir Khan? He'd been accused of selling technology, and Pakistani Air Force C-130 aircraft were seen flying to Tehran amidst reports of nuclear black marketing at that time. Pakistani ships were caught on the Suez Canal when they were carrying technology for Libya. All of that was happening illegally. So a nuclear black market that Pakistan is, it's actually part of Pakistan's state policy. Is that the reason why Pakistan is so scared today? It's scared it may be bombed next by the Americans, and India may just assist them. Joining me on this India Today special broadcast is Lieutenant General KJS Dhillon. He is former Director General of India's Defence Intelligence Agency. Dr. Tara Kartha is former Director at the National Security Council Secretariat. Sushant Sareen is a Senior Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. And Sushant Sareen, what do you make of this Pakistani fear that their Islamic bomb may be targeted next either by Israel or by the United States of America? And Sushant Sareen, you do remember in the 1980s, apparently there was such a plan.
Yeah, Gaurav, one, I think, in your in the initial report of your show, you were showing that imbecile Ahmed Mir, who thinks that car can run on water. So I don't think I'd take that guy seriously. But I think what is more important is that there has always been a certain amount of paranoia in Pakistan about the security and safety of its nuclear weapons. And ironically, it's not that the nuclear weapons that Pakistan has are seen as protecting Pakistan. In fact, Pakistan is trying to protect its nuclear weapons. So, that equation has been kind of turned on its head. But having said that, I think there are concerns among people who look at nuclear issues around the world, especially in the United States over the last year and a half, 2 years, that the Pakistanis are having a surreptitious program in which they might even be thinking of targeting the United States, or at least having the reach to enter the United States. Now, one of the problems with Pakistan is that the kind of the ecosystem there is in Pakistan, it's a very highly radicalized, Islamized ecosystem. And even now you see members of the ruling party, including their so-called defense minister, who's basically just a chaprasi, really. He doesn't call any shots, but nevertheless, he's the defense minister of that country. People like him, people very close to the ruling family, have been saying that we should be getting into an international jihad on this latest strikes in Iran. So there is that element inside Pakistan. It's part of the Pakistani mainstream, which thinks of targeting the United States, which thinks of targeting other countries with which they have religious or other differences. So there is certainly that aspect. But I think you also have to look at it, Gaurav, in a slightly different way. One is that the Pakistanis are very cleverly and carefully, because they've always been paranoid about a preemptive strike on their nuclear assets, they have dispersed their nuclear weapons. And nobody can be entirely sure where exactly those are stored. And as we are seeing in the case of Iran, even when you carry out spectacular strikes, you are still not sure whether you've actually dismantled and degraded the Iranian nuclear program to a point where you've actually rendered them toothless. So I think
let's take this point by point. Let's take this point by point. Let me bring in General Dhillon into this conversation. General Dhillon, Pakistan is a notorious black market for nuclear weapons technology, apparently sold to North Korea, to Iran. An attempt was made to sell it to Libya. Are Pakistan's fears genuine? Does Pakistan actually, in your appreciation, fear America and Israel could attempt to take its nukes out? And would they require Indian assistance to do so, as the Pakistanis fear?
Gaurav, good evening, and good evening to the fellow panelists and your viewers. Yes, Pakistan, fulfills too many conditions to be a target for taking out the nuclear weapons. Firstly, terrorism is the biggest threat to the mankind in today's world all across the globe. And Pakistan, being the fountainhead of terrorism, fulfills that condition. Second is, Pakistan works on the policy of a good man theory, bad man theory vis-a-vis India. Now, I'll explain this. in India, if somebody is in power, whichever political party, the theory is good man theory, that there is a democratic process, there will be elections, this party may come back. If not, the other party would come back, which would be not very irresponsible. So India always will be replaced by a responsible person. That is a good man theory. Whereas in Pakistan, every person who is in chair, he tends to give a signal, you protect me, otherwise the next chap is going to be a madman.
Worse, yeah.
So don't believe that next person. So every dispensation in Pakistan lives on this theory. And the third point is Pakistan is a broke country. It can do anything for dollars. And if it has the nukes and it has the nuclear technology, it has done it in the past. There is no denying the fact that it will do it again. Hence, the world is looking at Pakistan with very big suspicion. And the fourth point is Pakistan is like an ostrich with the head in the sand. It feels if the world needs them, that's why they're calling them for lunches and other things. So they believe them. Where the fact is, the world is using them for their benefit, but they are very sure in their heart of heart that here is the nuclear state, here is the terrorist state, here is a state where the Islamist terrorists run the writ, and here is a state which doesn't know who's going to be the next in the chair. And
And the
they
big
need the
fear
money.
is that Pakistan poses a bigger threat to the civilized world, perhaps bigger than even Iran. Dr. Tara Kartha, is that also your understanding? And what's your reading of these Pakistani fears that its nuclear assets could be targeted and that the West, after Iran, could try and defang Pakistan?
Well, there's a huge guilty conscience there, isn't it? I mean, fears always arise out of that. But like I would agree with General Dillon on two things. One is these guys have created terror attacks, which we brought out on your program, on the countries in Europe, in US, in Indonesia, in Malaysia. These are all Pakistanis who've gone out. Number two is more importantly, the fact is, if indeed they have, that's an if, they've launched an ICBM program, they've had it. The US is not going to allow a Pakistan to target Washington. That is just not on the cards. So if that takes place, then Pakistan has very good reasons to be frightened. Number two is it's just next to Iran, so there is the fear of what could happen next. But in practical terms, as you know, they have always been a pawn to different countries. So I don't see why the US has used Pakistan for years. And we all know that history. Why would it want to bomb Pakistan? They've helped even in Iran. In fact, it's a
Yes.
different issue that the Iranian centrifuges came from Pakistan. I mean, that's where it
Yes.
began, the whole game began. But we had somebody on a show recently, a US person saying, the Pakistanis have never threatened the US. Iran has. I'm like, look at the crowds, what they're chanting. They're burning your flag. So there's this kind of, shuttered view of Pakistan, which they take full advantage of. So I'll stop there.
No, you're absolutely right. We had Reverend Banks on the show the other day, who
Yeah.
for some reason just didn't believe that Pakistanis pose a threat to the Americans, despite Down with America being chanted every other day in Pakistan, quite like in Iran. But Sushant Sareen, Pakistanis have feared an Israeli plan even in the past. I want to draw you to reports that had emerged sometimes in early 1990s that Israel had suggested to India that India and Israel work together. This appeared in Pakistani media pretty extensively that time, that India and Israel collaborate to take out Kahuta in Rawalpindi district. Was there such a plan that never materialized? Some reports seem to indicate that Indira Gandhi at that time had backed out at the last moment.
Gaurav, one on Reverend Banks, I don't even know whether he knows where Pakistan is. If you give him a map of the world, if he can even point out where Pakistan is. Frankly, those guys I don't take seriously. But look, there are two parts to it. One is, was there a plan? Now, there is some literature that the Pakistani, even after the nuclear tests in 1998, the Pakistanis went to town, that a couple of nights before they tested, they went to town that India and Israel, that Israeli jets have landed in India and India and Israel are together likely to come and bomb Pakistani nuclear sites. That was one. But earlier in the 80s, also there was this talk that India and Israel were collaborating to take out Kahuta. Again, we have not heard anything to affirm that whether that was actually the case from an Indian source. And I would always take Pakistani sources with tons of salt. So that is the second. The third part is, and which is of greater concern to me. So even let us imagine a situation where the Americans or the Israelis or somebody else decide that the Pakistani nukes now present a clear and present danger, and they need to take those out. Now, the problem is going to be that once you start bombing Pakistani nuclear facilities, there are two issues now. One is that there are three actually. One is, can you take them all out? Second, assuming you can take them all out, then there is the second attendant problem. What happens to the fallout? Supposing you are going to be bombing places where enrichment facilities are taking place. We are right on the goddamn border. Yeah? There is a reason why between India and Pakistan, we have an agreement that we will not attack each other's nuclear facilities. And if supposing some third party was also going to come and start attacking Pakistani nuclear facilities, then there is that very real danger of fallout coming on to India. And that's not something we are looking forward to. And the third problem is going to be that if you don't get all of them, then it is part of the Pakistani strategic thinking, strategic doctrines, that no matter who attacks us, no matter if some Martian comes and attacks us or our nuclear facilities, our response is going to be that we are going to attack India and India's nuclear facilities. This is that, that childish, puerile behavior doctrines, which, small 4-year, 3-year-old kids have, that if mother has scolded one kid, that kid will go and beat the sibling because he thinks that is he can trouble the mother. That is the Pakistani attitude vis-a-vis India. So even if we have no part to play in it, they will, if there is an attack on Pakistani nukes,
Okay.
then the Pakistani thing is that we are going to come and attack India. Now, we just have a neighbor from hell, and we just need to be prepared to, deal with them with whatever they bring towards us, and then do whatever we need to do. So I think we need to look at it from that aspect also, which very often we miss out. Iranians
General
did not
Dhillon,
have a bomb to attack the
okay.
Israel. And in many other cases, that has not been the case.
General Dhillon, Operation Sindoor was a very clear signal that India will no longer fall for Pakistan's nuclear blackmail. Because when you look at images of what India did during Operation Sindoor, and each time I come back to it because I think that was spectacular, the manner in which 13 air bases and radar stations in Pakistan were targeted. That completely exposes the vulnerabilities of Pakistan. Their air defense system is not worth whatever they may have begged, borrowed or paid China for. Has that also increased Pakistan's fears that if India can destroy air bases, America and Israel can very easily do that to them from the other side?
Gaurav, totally agree with you. On one hand, Pakistan's this normal conventional capabilities was so badly exposed during Operation Sindoor that they will have to now start calling the nuclear bogey all over again. And second point is, when everyone was either neutral or with Israel, Pakistan was the country which was standing with Iran during the recent conflict which was there in that area. Now that probably has not gone down well with the USA, in spite of their army chief having had lunch with the US president. So these things, when the conventional defenses are a risk or are a sort of a liability, then the calling of nuclear bluff is very, very important. And whatever little air defense they have, in case Pakistan gets attacked from multiple directions, that is, it opens the front with India towards the east, and then towards the west, there is Iran, which may become friendly subsequently, but towards the south, the Arabian Sea, the naval assets, and anything coming from American assets from that direction. I don't think Pakistan's capability can deny access from east as well as from south as far as the air defense is concerned. So Pakistan is not in a very good position, and their doubts that they may be the next are very well founded. And the point which Kartha ma'am was making, in case they attempt to have the ICBMs which can reach Washington, I think that will be the last straw on the camel's back. No
Because
country,
America is already
especially
warning
US,
them.
will not accept anything on their homeland. US is
Yeah.
prepared to accept anything on anyone else's homeland. but not on their homeland.
True. And of course, now India is saying nothing on our homeland either, that we are very clear about. But Dr. Tarakartha, there have been reports of joint exercises to defang Pakistan, to take out their nuclear assets. Is that Pakistan's, biggest fear? Like, unlike Iran, they don't have a Fordo-like facility where they can store their enriched uranium, 90 meters deep or 80 meters deep. And Operation Sindoor has also exposed their vulnerabilities. But is there bigger fear a strike or sanctions that may follow should they actually go ahead with the intercontinental ballistic missile? Because why would they require an ICBM?
That's a very good question. I just want to make one point. See, CENTCOM, as I think one of them said on your show, they have a standby force, which will go into Pakistan at any time when they feel there is a threat. They know exactly where these things are stored, and that was, if I'm not mistaken, that's public knowledge. And that's something, of course, we also know. We also know where things are. It's not that we don't. Number two, the problem is theirs is a plutonium program, unlike Iran. Iran's is a uranium enrichment. So the rate is
Correct.
much. So here you have a very real danger. So I think the possibility is, if at all something happens, which again I doubt, I don't know, is the sanctions route, because they're already in such a bad place in terms of their economy, that sanctions on them, but by just the US, that's good enough. China is not going to support that for obvious reasons, but they have not had much luck with China either in terms of they're rolling over their loans. But how long will Beijing do this? As one Beijing professor came and said, he said, CPEC is not a charitable organization. She told the Pakistanis this. So let's see how this plays out. But there, in terms of taking those out, obviously there's a risk, but I think these guys know where the things are. So I'll just stop at that point.
Okay. And why would Pakistan need an ICBM? Is this a vanity project, or is that a threat that they want to send out to the United States, that we can make missiles that will take out a target 11,000 kilometers away? General Dhillon, your appreciation of this conversation of the ICBM and this report from Washington, D.C. that seemed to indicate that there would be severe sanctions that will follow should there be a Pakistani ICBM?
Gaurav, there is a race for Islamic leadership between Pakistan, Iran, and Turkey. So all three of them want to be at the high chair, representing a big brother in the Islamic world. And everywhere in the Islamic world, USA is enemy number one. In the eyes of the public, the regimes may do whatever. So with that ICBM, which can go and hit the mainland USA, they are trying to tell the Islamic world that we have that capability which we can, target West. But sanctions alone will not work, because when you put sanctions on Pakistan, Pakistan will go further down. And that is one thing which China doesn't want, because China wants, like the Shahukar, they want their money back. And if the sanctions happen, the China is not going to get their money back. And second is, when sanctions happen, the extreme steps can be taken by Pakistan, which I'm saying that they can actually sell the technology or technical know-how of nuclear weapons. It will be a precision strikes as and when the world decides, and sanctions may be only to stop the ICBM program at whatever stage it is, so that they don't actually achieve the end result.
Because Sushant Sareen, both China and the United States are seen as countries that have in the past helped Pakistan's nuclear program. In fact, the US should, as Dr. Tarakartha also pointed out, and as did General Dhillon, the US should actually find it easy to defang Pakistan, because they know where all the nuclear assets are. And there were some reports that seem to indicate that they not only control those locations, as some experts in Pakistan have said, that even Pakistani generals did not have access to Jacobabad and to Pasni. It was completely in control of the Americans, but they also controlled the delivery mechanism, the F-16s, and the storage facilities at all locations, sir.
Yeah, Gaurav, a couple of things. I don't know if the Americans have all the information of where the Pakistanis would have stored their nukes. And I don't think anybody would really have an entire fix on it. And in this game, until and unless you know 100%, you don't know anything. Okay, that is one. Secondly, there is this whole thing about how the Americans are going to, if the threat becomes real for the Americans, then yes, I think they will take action. But I don't see how sanctions can prevent somebody from developing delivery mechanisms. Now, the Pakistanis don't depend upon only F-16s for delivery. They have missile systems which they can, they can load nukes on and fire those. So I don't think the delivery mechanism is anymore a question for them. Third, and very importantly, many of these delivery mechanisms are mobile. As we saw in Iran's case, even though the Israelis had a fix on a lot of the Iranian infrastructure, if you have mobile launchers, then it's very difficult to get a fix on where exactly those are and take them out before they can fire. So that is another factor which comes into play. And then there is that entire issue of, you know, the Pakistanis fear that if the Americans were to come for them, they must have some way to hit back at the United States, not just in some base nearby, but on the mainland. Because if they have a reach up to the mainland, for example, like North Korea now has, or if Iran had that reach, would the Americans come for the Pakistani nukes or the Iranian nukes, right? So I think there is that factor. It's not just about vanity, it's also about trying to get a kind of power whereby you can hit back at the other side if they were to come for you. I would imagine that is what is driving the Pakistani nuclear program. And don't be surprised if the Chinese were also doing some nudge, nudge, wink, wink to let them get that kind of a capability. The Americans turned a blind eye to the Pakistani nuclear program. They did not aid it actively, right? And the reason why they did that was they needed Pakistan because they were fighting this war against communism in Afghanistan. And Pakistan was the frontline state at that point of time. They had to turn a blind eye. The Pakistanis used that opportunity to develop their nukes. The Chinese can help the Pakistanis to develop that capability and have a kind of another dog snapping at America's heel. Pakistan is a dog which keeps snapping at India's heel and keeps the Chinese, the Chinese keep us occupied on the Western Front. The same thing can happen between Pakistan and the United States, and the Chinese will laugh their way to the bank. So, and you sanctions will never be able to achieve this, and I'm not sure if military force will be able to do it. So, I think it's anybody's guess how if you want to defang Pakistan, how you are going to go about it.
Okay, Dr. Tarak Artha, your appreciation, how can one defang Pakistani nukes should push come to shove because of that nudge, nudge, wink, wink, letting the Pakistanis get the nuke? What are the consequences in your appreciation, for the US to do so? Because in case, Pakistan gets those intercontinental ballistic missiles, and in case Pakistan can threaten the US, then the US would ultimately, instead of taking on Pakistan, will end up turning a blind eye even further. Or will it then, like it took on Iran, will take on Pakistan?
I know, just as y'all were talking, I was just wondering if this is a little bit of nuclear blackmail by Pakistan, saying, I'll develop this or else. This is Pakistan's strategy. You've seen their doctrine, right? It's staggering. This is, if I get economically weak, I will attack. If I get my ships are stopped, I will attack. So this, if you look at the history of US nuclear engagement, whenever a country goes beyond the point, it kind of co-opts it. That's what it does always. Even with France, UK completely ended their program. France, of course, it co-opted. Pakistan is a different kettle of fish. So this could be an attempt at getting, again, they are desperate for US attention and money. So I'm just wondering if this is the way it is going, because defanging them is, well, like Sushant said, it's not the easiest thing.
And given their track record, General Dillon, the last 2 minutes I have on this part of the show, look at Abdul Qadir Khan selling nuclear technology not just to Iran but also to Libya. US and allies ensured Libya was not armed. Iran is now repeatedly being targeted, but US continues to have this this double standards when it comes to Pakistan. It was an ally in the war against Soviet Union in Afghanistan, and then again to take on Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan. But US knows Pakistan's been playing a double game throughout with Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad, and that long list, including Daniel Pearl being killed in Pakistan. And yet US doesn't take any action. Why?
Gaurav, firstly, I tend to agree with Dr. Karsa ma'am, because Pakistan has this very well-oiled and well-maintained, machine wherein they will do a small blackmail and get lots of money. So that may well be one reason. And second is, why would US not do it? Here in Pakistan, they have all the nukes, they have all the conventional things, and USA would take it out. And in my understanding, USA will have all the wherewithal in spite of the double game. And double game Pakistan can play because of its geostrategic location. I always say this. Because in this part of the world, if India was not friendly to US, Afghanistan is an unfinished agenda in the north, Iran is unfinished agenda in the west, and then there is Central Asian Republic. And then there is the Arabian Sea and Indian Ocean. So only country which can give you bases and give you airspace to do anything in this part of the world is Pakistan. So Pakistan understands this importance of their geostrategic location, and Pakistan encashes on it every time. But
So
if
it's the
US
Hira Mandi
decides
with
to
the
take
nuclear
out-
weapon. That's what you're saying. A gun for hire, a place for hire with a nuclear weapon. So it has aces in both its hands. That means it has these aces up its sleeve, Sushant Sareen.
Yeah, it has its aces, and look, to give the devil his due, they play their cards well. So, for example, even when the nuclear Walmart was caught, what was happening at that time? The Americans were in Afghanistan once again. They desperately needed the Pakistanis at that point of time. What did the Pakistanis do? Had it happened without the entire 9/11 incident playing out and the Pakistanis had been caught out, do you think the Americans would have let them get away with it? No way. But what did the Pakistanis do? So they begged and borrowed. They let Abdul Qadir Khan, who could not have been doing it on his own, they let him out
Yes.
to hang to dry. What they did was they went and they sucked up to the Americans. They said, look, we will do whatever you ask us to do to get proper procedures, proper protocols in place so that our nukes are fail-safe mechanisms are worked out, and all kinds of new mechanisms will be brought in, which to some extent they managed to do. And they got the Americans off their back. But the problem is that if you are now going to be able to develop capabilities to hit the American mainland, then the Americans have a serious problem on their hand. And
Okay.
even if it's Donald Trump and with all the craziness which is going on in the United States and the chaotic way of policy making, even with that, I am not so sure if the Americans will countenance either an Iranian bomb or Pakistani capabilities to hit
Okay.
American mainland. So I think it
Let's
will
see.
be a major problem for the West, especially for the Americans, if the Pakistanis were to go ahead, notwithstanding whatever geographical or geopolitical space they occupy, and whatever services they can render. Those services can
Okay.
always be bought somewhere else as well. I think.
There's an old saying in Hindi, chor ki daadi mein tinka. And the panic in Pakistan very clearly is that tinka in the chor. Because Pakistan now is scared that it's done what it's done, it's wrong, and it knows sooner than later it will be targeted. Its days are numbered, and we'll be tracking that story very, very closely. Dr. Dhillon, Dr. Tara Kartha, Jel Dhillon, Dr. Tara Kartha, and Sushant Sareen for joining me here on India Today. Many thanks.